Someone who knows plenty about Afghanistan is, of course, British retired Colonel Richard Kemp, a regular friend here on Outsiders, who was in command of Operation Fingal in Afghanistan from July to November in 2003. Colonel, welcome back to Outsiders. How are you?
Thank you very much, Rowan. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's always great to have you here, Richard. You have called, let's get straight to the point, you have called for the court-martialing of Joe Biden. Explain why.
Well, I think he is the commander-in-chief of the United States forces, and he effectively has surrendered to the Taliban. And I think, without good cause. And I think it's right that a commander-in-chief should face court-martial. Now, I know, actually, that is not within the US Constitution. I say it, I use those terms really to underline the real seriousness of what he's done. I think other people have been calling for impeachment, and I think that would be probably a more constitutionally viable course.
So what's happening in Afghanistan? Give us your take on it.
Well, now, as of today, all British forces have now withdrawn from Afghanistan. There's no more British forces on the ground, as has been the case for 20 years. I know the Australians pulled out a day or so ago, and I'm sure the Americans, if they haven't all left now, will be leaving very shortly. And what they're leaving behind a couple of things. First of all, a living hell for the people of Afghanistan who remain there, particularly those ones who assisted British forces, American forces, Australian forces, and other international forces, as well as the government. So this place is going to be back to what it was when the Taliban ruled last time, despite the nice words they're using to try and delude the West about it. Perhaps equally seriously or more seriously, the Taliban will now allow Afghanistan again to become a safe haven for terrorists. Jihadists from around the world will flock into Afghanistan. And from there, they will train, they will plan, prepare, and then they will launch attacks against the West, aided and abetted by the Taliban. And in addition, we've got a situation whereby jihadists everywhere, in Australia, in Britain, other countries around the world, jihadists will have been inspired by this tremendous victory for the Taliban. They will now be re-energized and they will recruit very, very easily. There will be funders giving them a lot more money, and they also will present an enormous threat to our countries.
James.
Colonel Kemp, I wish we could be speaking under happier circumstances, but I want to ask you as well, not just about jihad and jihadists, but also how much does Biden's actions here play into the global narrative of American decline, something that is then being picked up by people like Xi Jinping to say, America, it's no longer your time, it is now ours. How destabilizing is this to current and future geopolitics around the world?
You raise a great point, James. I think the reality is that President Biden said, he gave as one of his excuses for pulling all the forces out of Afghanistan, that he was doing so in order to refocus US effort against Russia and China and other authoritarian states. But this has the opposite effect. What this does is to undermine not just the West, not just NATO, but it undermines the potential sphere of influence of democratic countries. What countries that we're hoping to entice away from China and Russia and onto the Western sphere of influence, they will be looking at the situation and they will say, well, why would we do that? These are unreliable, they're fair weather allies, and we can rely more on China and Russia. Both of those countries will also be most overjoyed by what's gone on, and they will look at US and Western weakness and do even more than they've been doing up until now to exploit it, thinking there will be no serious reaction now from the US.
Daisy.
Look, Richard, it strikes me that Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was just so incompetent, as we know, that it beggars belief. I mean, right down to leaving, many tens of billions of dollars worth of military equipment just sitting there for the Taliban to take and use. I mean, if you were writing a screenplay about a withdrawal from a war, your editor would send it back to you and say, tone it down, it's not believable. I mean, it is just that bad. to the point where I've seen conspiracy theories floating around the internet that perhaps it's so bad that Biden did it on purpose. I mean, that it's the only possible explanation according to some crazy people. But long story short, what do you think was going through Biden's head? How could he possibly have got it this wrong?
Well, it's a good question. I think not only was the strategy wrong to withdraw without conditions, without placing any restrictions on the Taliban, as President Trump himself, when he originally planned to leave Afghanistan, he was only going to do so on a conditions basis. In other words, that the Taliban did not allow Afghanistan to be used as a safe haven against terrorism. I believe that was misjudged as well, but it's nothing like as catastrophic as Biden has produced here. So it's not just the strategic aspect, also the implementation of it. He did it. He didn't give enough time for the Afghan government and security forces to prepare themselves for a completely new situation without US support. He did it also at the height of the fighting season, when the Taliban is at its most active. If he'd waited to give the Afghan government more time and to wait until, say, late autumn or winter, when the Taliban are far less active, we would not have seen the West being chased out, as it were, of Afghanistan. Not just chased out, but chased out under fire, as we have seen. And I think the other really serious issue was that Western countries did not withdraw, did not start evacuating people, civilians from their countries, and also Afghans who had helped them. They did not start evacuating it until very recently, until the catastrophe happened. That should have started months ago. And I think what was going through President Biden's mind was two things. First of all, he's long opposed the presence in Afghanistan. It's been his long-standing position, and he was sticking with that. And secondly, he had an eye on the midterm elections. That was, I think, his overwhelming desire to get out by 9/11. So come the midterms, he said, I and only I, after four presidents had presided over a war in Afghanistan, I, the great Joe Biden, withdrew everyone. We got them all out by the 20th anniversary of 9/11. An absolute catastrophic decision, and one that is it's so awful to contemplate the fate of Afghanistan, the fate of the West now, on the basis of his hopes for electoral success at the midterms.
Exactly. Richard, just one briefly before we go, ISIS-K, is this the Delta variant of ISIS? Are they in league with the Taliban? Are they enemies of the Taliban? Tell us about them.
Well, there is a narrative going around now, which seems to be pushed in many places, certainly in the UK and the US. There is a narrative that they are the bitter enemies of the Taliban, and the Taliban are going to deal with them. And I think this narrative is intended to take the heat off Joe Biden for his effective empowerment of the Taliban. Now they're being painted as being more moderate than and the Islamic State is far more dangerous, which is not true. And nor are they enemies of the Taliban. They sometimes hate each other, they sometimes kill each other, they sometimes work together. Before I do go there, I appreciate you want to kick me off your show rapidly. Before you do go, I would just like to pay tribute to the British, American, Australian troops who sacrificed so much in Afghanistan over the 20-year campaign, and the lives of those who died was not given in vain. Over 20 years, they prevented terrorist attacks in our country. So they lost their lives, tragically, but they saved the lives of innocent people in our own countries.
Richard, we would never kick you off the show. We'd keep you here all day if we could, you know that. But it's very late there in the UK. But those are wonderful words to conclude with. And I'm sure you have friends and colleagues, former colleagues, and our thoughts from Outsiders are with them as well. Colonel Richard Kemp, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders, and we'll speak to you again soon. And thanks for staying up so late.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rowan.